For users who don't have Project installed on their computer, you can export the data from Project into Excel if they have the Excel program. So to go ahead and do this, come up here and click on the File tab, go down to Save As, and let me come over here in the navigation pane and select Desktop. We'll save it there. And then we want to save it not as Project, but as an Excel file. You can do it in the latest version, which has the extra X in the extension. If you don't know anything about extensions, you can watch my Windows training video on extensions, but that extra X means that that file is going to be more stable, and it's going to have a smaller file size, as opposed to an earlier version of Excel. Let's go ahead and save it to the latest here. Even though it doesn't say 2007-2010, if it doesn't say it, then assume that it is 2007 and 2010. So let's go ahead and select that, and then we can change the name and call it something spiffy in any case. Let's go ahead and click Save. Opens up the export wizard where it's going to ask us a bunch of questions. We give it answers. Based upon those answers is what we're going to export. Let's go ahead and click Next. And then what is the format of data you want to export? We'll choose the data, selected data, click Next. And then do we want to do a new map where we say, okay, these are the fields you want to export from Project into Excel, or use something that Project has set up that, well, we'll look at that in just a minute. Let's do it in our own custom way here. And select Next, and let's say it's going to be Resources, and then down below for the Excel options, Export includes headers. You want that, and the reason why is because when you get a bunch of data, if you don't have headers, chances are you're not going to know what that data is. Like if you have 3 columns of data, without the headers or the labels for those columns, you're going to be going, okay, is this the baseline cost? Is that the actual cost? What are these columns of data for? So be sure to include these headers for these columns as you see them in Project, like the task name is for the data in the task name column and so on. Let's go ahead and select Next. And then the destination worksheet in the workbook, you can leave it as resource_table1, or we can say resource backspace. Let's see, resources. And then for the fields from Project that we want to export to Excel, let's go ahead and click here and select a field from Project. Let's type in the letter N for name, because we want the name of the resources, and you can see down in the preview window there's the resources names, and from Project it's going to be the name field into Excel with the field also called name. Okay, and you can see here from name to name field. Let's go ahead and go below that and say that we want, let's type in COS, there we go, cost. Let's go ahead and select that. So you can see that it's going to be from the cost name field in Project to the cost name field, or export the data into a field called cost in Excel. You can see it down below, okay? And we'll keep it simple, click Next, and then we can save that, so next time we don't have to go ahead and set this up and say, okay, I want these fields from Project to be exported to Excel. So we can click on Save Map, and we can call it my spiffed out resource costs, or costs, there we go. And then go ahead and click Save, click Finish. It should be on the desktop. Let's come up here and minimize this down to the taskbar, and there we go. Something spiffy. Double click, and it's got the resources, their names, and their cost. Now if you didn't have the headers, then this wouldn't be there, or that. The name of the fields from Project, as you recall, we left the default check saying that we want to go ahead and include headers for our columns here for the data. I mean, you could guess pretty much like, okay, this column, let's see, I bet those are resources. But without the header for this, you could go, what is that field? Actual cost, baseline cost, what is it? And then go ahead and freak out. So be sure to go ahead and include those headers. Let's close out of that, go back to Project here, and let's do it again. Let's come up here, click on the File tab, although with a twist here, so don't stop the video yet. Let's click Save As, and let's do the desktop, and we'll change this again to Excel. Let's see, Spiffy, we could call this like Spiffy 2. Since it's our second export, and click Save. Opens up the export wizard, click Next. Selected data, click Next. And as you recall, we saved this, so we can go ahead and select Use Existing Map, click Next, and we saved it as My Spiffed Out Resource Costs. Probably would have been better to have it as Export, because when I look at that, is that supposed to be an import or an export? I mean, hey, that spells it out right there, Task Export Table Map, okay? In any case, you get the idea. So I can go ahead and select that, my spiffed out resource costs, and click Next. You can see it saved my settings here and the fields, and I can, click Finish. Let's go back. Instead of doing that, let's go ahead and select something else, because these are the other ones that you'll have in Project by default that Project thinks might be helpful, so you don't have to set this up, like the cost data by task export. Let's go ahead and select that and take a look at that and click Next. See, we're going to be exporting task with headers or labels for those fields, which is always nice. Go ahead and click Next. And then we've got the name of the worksheet, task_cost. So when we open up the workbook, well, like I said, that's the name of the worksheet. We can go ahead and leave it as is. We can change anything that we want here. We can go ahead and delete a row if we don't like it, but we'll leave it as is. You can see down below that we've got, let's see, ID active, which means that is the task and project going to be worked on? Because if it's not active, that means you can still have the task in there as a reference, but it's not going to be worked on, okay? So let's see, task mode, auto-scheduled, name, fixed cost, baseline cost. Oh, that's fancy. Let's go ahead and click Next, and then click Finish. So it exports to the desktop. Let's go ahead and minimize this down to the taskbar so we can see it, and it's spiffy too. Oh, that's nice. Double click on that. We've got the row headers, or the labels for each columns in the header row. You'll learn this if you watch my Excel training videos, that the first row in Excel is known as the header row. It's where you go ahead and you put in the headings for your columns, hence header row. And we've got, let's see, everything's active, so they're all being worked on. The task mode, auto-scheduled. In any case, you can see everything there, the costs. Okay, cool. Then as a side note is that when you export that, if you're trying to figure out in project the comparable of what you exported, like it had task and it had costs, well, you can come over here and right click on the view bar and go down to more views, and the view was the task sheet. Let's go ahead and scroll down, task sheet, and click apply. And the table within the view here of the task sheet, let me right click on the header cell for the table and right click on it. You can see its entry. You want to go to cost. And as you recall, is what we just exported. It had the task name, the cost. Let's see also the baseline cost, variance cost, pretty much everything that you see here except for one that I can think of is the active field to let you know if that task is going to be worked on or not. And you can, of course, always right click on a column to insert a field if you don't see it and select active, and there you go. Do you want this task to be worked on? Like, let's click below, start the manual. No. Puts a line through it and says, we're not going to start it. Okay. Well, we do want to start it, so voila. Let's go back to yes. As you recall in the previous training video, if somebody didn't have Project installed on their computer, we exported the data into an Excel file, but what if they don't have Excel either? The next best thing you could do is you could take a snapshot of a project plan view and save it as an image or paste it into Word. Well, let's say they don't have Word either. In any case, we could just save it as an image. For example, go ahead and select the screen that you want to go ahead and take a snapshot, and then come up here on the Task tab to the Clipboard group and click on the Copy drop-down arrow and say that you want to copy picture. You can do it for the screen, for a printer, which is a little bit higher resolution, or as an image file. Now, if you go ahead and do it for the screen, then you can open up Microsoft Word and paste it in Word. But again, if they don't have Word, then you can export it as an image file. You can copy the rows on the screen or selected rows if you want to select them. You can set the time scale saying, look, I just want to see the range from August the 28th through September the 1st. Let's do it as we see it on the screen. So we'll do it once. We'll do it for the screen and click OK and click. Did you hear that? So after it clicks, it doesn't do click. Let me go ahead and open up Word here. Let me give it a right click down below and select in the jump list Microsoft Word 2010, which you don't get the jump list unless you have Windows 7 or later here. And let's go ahead and click to open that up. And then come up here, you can see on the Home tab in the Clipboard group, my paste button is active because there's something on it. Click on it and hey, that's not too bad. Kind of small. You go ahead and select it and click and drag the corner handle to try to stretch it open here. Or come up here on the View tab and let's go zoom in at 200%. Click OK. Alright, looking a little bit better. In any case, you can go ahead and stretch the page open in Microsoft Word. You can learn about more how to set the margins and the portrait or landscape options by watching my Word training videos. Boy, I'm just plugging my videos all over the place, aren't I? Okay, watch them. Let's go ahead and close out, not save it there. Then the other option was to come up here, click again on the Copy drop-down arrow, Copy Picture, and let's export it as a GIF image file. And you can see it's going to export it. Let's do it to the desktop. Click Browse. Select Desktop in the navigation pane, and it will be a spiffy software training manual GIF. That's the extension for the image file. Click Okie dokie. For everything, we'll leave it as the same. Click OK. Minimize this down to the taskbar, and there's the spiffy GIF. Double click. It opened it up in the Internet Explorer here. For the extension here, .gif, it wants to do that. You can go ahead and set this to open up in a picture viewing program. Again, you can learn more about this in my Windows training videos, but let me close out of that. You can right click on it and say open with. Instead of Internet Explorer, which is the default, we can do Paint. That's always fun. And maximize that. It doesn't look too bad, does it? Can scroll over and back. Close out. Once you have your project plan here set up and ready to go, as we went over in all the previous training videos, the least of which to have a list of all the tasks needed to be completed, that is, in order to complete the project goal, which in this case is to create a spiffy software training manual. And of course, over in the Gantt chart, we have a list of all the resources next to the tasks that are assigned to. And don't forget to set a baseline to take a snapshot before you begin the project. Again, once you have your project plan set up, remember, it's just a plan of what you hope to happen versus what actually is going to happen. For example, let's take a look at task 3 here, and let me go ahead and click and drag the split bar over to the right so I can see both the start and finish dates for our task, and then double click really fast so it can do a snap to the closest column, which is the finish column. And, well, you can see that it starts on August the 31st for Examine the Software by Writer 1. Let's say that he's sick and can't come in until the next day. Well, again, we have our plan here versus what is actually happening. So to enter in our quote-unquote actuals, there's another view we can go to enter those in. In fact, in that view, you'll have the same fields up here as you see here, but with a 3-letter prefix of ACT for actual duration, actual start, actual finish, and so on. And the purpose of keeping our defaults, as you see here, from the actuals is so we can compare between the two, and that can be very telling in our project here and as a lesson also for future projects of what to do or not to do. Like maybe we don't want to use Writer 1 because he typically starts his tasks late. Now there's a couple ways to entering in your actuals, and we can do it by switching views. So I'm going to come up here and right click on the view bar and going to the task sheet view. Now in this view, to enter in the actuals, I'm going to change the table. And as you recall, you can right click on the table header, that empty cell there, and go to tracking. And there you go. ACT for the actual start, actual finish, and you got the actual duration. So if I hover over to the right hand side of that column header until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, you can click and drag that out so you can actually see the actual duration title for that column. And then I'll do it also for the task. Let me click and drag or double click really fast and it does what's called a best fit. Of course, it opens up the gap where the text was wrapping before, so I can hover below that in between the two row headers until I can see arrows pointing up and down and click and drag, or just double click really fast, and you get the idea. I'll go ahead and clean this up really fast. Okay, there we go, it's clean. Now, in all simplicity, when you want to enter in a progress of a task, like 50%, 75%, or 100%, like let's say for starting the training manual, if there hasn't been any changes to the actuals, like the actual start or finish dates, in other words, we're on target, we haven't started any earlier or any later, you don't have to enter in the plan for the actuals here, because the plan will automatically be pulled in as the default for the actuals if you put in the %. That way you don't have to type it in, you don't have to do it for both fields, you just do it for one field and it automatically pulls in the plan, 100, hit enter, and there you go. The plan was August 31st for starting the manual. And you can see that whatever cell that you change, if it affects other cells or updates them, it'll highlight it. So remember, these cells used to be NA for not applicable, and it says, okay, since this task has been completed, that means that we're going off the plan, that the actuals will be August 31st, okay? You can do it that way, or let me go ahead and type in 0. You can actually right-click anywhere on that task row, and when you right-click, it brings up the mini formatting toolbar. You can click on the %complete. Of course, you only get quarter percents instead of being particular, like 33% in the % column here. Or you can come up here on the task tab to the schedule group, and there you go, 50% or 100%. Let's go down to the next task, and let's say, well, before I go ahead and mark this, let's say 50% complete, notice that the remaining duration is 5 days. So the duration is a total of 5 days. If I say 50%, see if this makes sense. You can see 50% complete, and it puts in the actual start date because I didn't type it in. Project assumes that we're going off the default plan. So the default was August the 31st. 50%. Actual duration so far is 2.5 days, but we still have, of the 5 days, 2.5 remaining. and then of course the actual cost, and then in a 5-day work week for the one resource, writer 1, 20 hours is half of 40, okay? Now let me go ahead and undo that. So if you just use the remaining duration field as a reference, you're fine. But if you come in here thinking that actually we're this percent complete through the task, let me go ahead and say this is how much we have remaining. Don't do it, because if you do, you're going to update the plan. Now the plan for the task examine software is 5 days. When I do it this way and I actually adjust the days within the remaining duration field, I'm updating the plan. I just say don't mess with it, just use it as a reference unless you actually intend to update the duration. Okay, so when I hit enter, there you go, now it's 4 days. And what's interesting about this is that it went from 12 days because we reduced it by 1 day for the research phase to 11 days. But why did this go from 13 days to 14 days? Why did it increase? You'd think it would reduce it, if anything. Well, it's knowing your project, and this project here, which is different from the project exercises we covered in level 1. I wanted to change things up a bit so you have something to work with or figure out, as it were. But there's actually over here, let me go to the Gantt chart, right click, and in the Gantt chart you can see the indicator column on task 9. It has a constraint. Now this constraint for task 9 says that this task cannot start any earlier than September the 22nd. Well, when one task gets shortened, it creates a domino effect and it wants to bring everybody in. And it does, it brings these two in, but it keeps this one because it can't start any earlier. So when these two get pulled in 1 day, then it goes from, well, the 13 days to 14 because it's actually stretching it out, keeping this static, but pulling these in. So where it used to be 13 days, these guys get to start a day earlier, but this one still is stubborn and it stays there because of the task constraint, okay? So that's why, again, it went from 13 days, because this one won't move up a day, it'll stay put, to 14 days. Let's right click and go back to the task sheet, okay? And then if we come over here, and again, we change this, the remaining duration from 5 to 4, that's the actual duration of the plan now, and we say 50% complete, then it goes off the plan from 4 days saying we've actually completed 2 days, we have a remaining of 2 days left, and so the cost is $240 for 16 hours. We're halfway through. So again, just remember the remaining duration, don't change anything in it if you don't want to change the plan, otherwise use it as a reference as when you're updating the progress of your task to see how much you have left, okay? We're halfway through, and let's say we actually didn't start on the 31st. Let's click in there, click on the drop down arrow, and say we started 2 days later. Select that, and then notice the outline phase goes from 14 to 12 days. And so it's, again, we've got that constraint here. That's playing along with the changes that we make up here in the effect that now that we're starting later, these two start a bit later. In other words, these two will start closer to the constraint date of this task that can start no earlier than September the 22nd. So the phase for these subtasks here get reduced. So you see the difference between the plan, what you have set, and what is actually happening. Let me go ahead and change this to 100%. Up, 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 up. Or type in 100, hit enter, and there we go. And you want to keep an eye on this, that you want to make sure that what you enter in here reflects the desired changes you want to see over here. That's one thing to keep in mind, especially if you forgot about the remaining duration field and you're like, now what happens if I change this here? If it already has days in it, like the next one 4 days, it'll actually update the plan's duration, okay? You can also mess with the hours over here if there's 32, and let's go down to 20 hours and hit enter. Notice that the actual work, what we type in here, reflects the percent complete. Because we reduce the hours, it says, okay, 63% is complete. So you got the formulas going back and forth between these cells. What you select here for complete will reflect the work, and the work vice versa for percentage here. And then type in 100, and we've completed that task. And then of the task summary for these subtasks here, you can see 40% overall has been completed, with this task being completed. And we've got the actual duration of 4.4 days. And then not to leave you hanging until a couple of training videos later, but when you start marking these complete here, well, we covered this in an earlier training video. Over in the Gantt chart, if you come over here and right click on the view bar and go to the Gantt chart, and let me scroll over, you can see the progress line for the task. When the black line goes all the way through, it's at 100% complete. You can see in the pop-up down below it says 100% complete. The variance table is used to check to see if your project is on track. You can bring up that table by coming up here in, well, with any table and right-clicking on the table header, which is that blank cell just above the row header 0. When you right-click on it, you get a list of the other tables. There's variance. But I'm not going to do it in this view because, well, I've got this Gantt chart over here that I don't want to deal with. I want to be able to see the variance table in its entirety without having to drag the split bar over to see more of the table and then to drag it back to be able to see the Gantt chart. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and switch views and go to a view that just has a table and no charts. By coming over here and right-clicking on the view bar, I know the task sheet is one, and, well, if our tasks are on track, then our project's going to be on track, so let's go to that view. In fact, as you recall in the previous training video, we came to this view to enter in our actuals, and we changed the table from entry to tracking so we can bring up the actual columns here. So if you come up here and right-click on the table header, you can see tracking still there. And what that means is that anytime that you're in a project session and you change tables within a view and you go back to that view, it will remember what table you were last in, which was the tracking table here. So in this view, before I go ahead and change it to variance, let's say that this task has been completed. Search internal documentation, and let's go ahead and give it a right click on the task. Come up here in the mini formatting toolbar, and let's do 100% complete. You can see that it highlighted all those cells that are affected by this task being completed by entering in, well, the actual start date and finish dates, and the least of which the project summary task for these 3 subtasks. Well, it's at 80% right now, and obviously when we complete the last task, it'll be at 100% for that phase. Okay, let's say that also that this task actually started 2 days ahead of schedule on the 6th. Okay, I'm going to come up here and click Save. And then let's go ahead and change this from the tracking table to the variance. Let's right-click on the table header and go down to variance. We have the start and finish columns in this view. Now they don't say actual start or actual finish because the start and finish columns are actually showing us 2 things. Anytime we update a task and we have an actual date, it writes it over here in the start column. But for those tasks that we haven't marked completed yet, it'll hold its original start or baseline dates, as you can see down below on those tasks that we haven't started yet. So in this view, you're looking at the start column and want to compare it to your baseline start column here, where it never changes because, well, that was the original plan of our project, as you recall in our baseline training video. And be sure that you set your baseline before you start entering in your actuals, because if you don't, this thing isn't going to make any sense because you'll have nothing to compare it to. So if you don't set that baseline, you'll have NA here, which means not applicable because, well, we didn't set it. So when you come over here and you look at, well, that's the milestone, did we start on time? August 31st, over here to the baseline start, yes. Okay, let's go to the task here, examine software, September 2nd. The baseline start was the 31st. We're off 2 days. Well, if you look over here in the variance columns for the start and finish, anything that's positive means that you're behind, and anything that's negative means that you're ahead of schedule. So we are behind 2 days because our baseline start was the 31st, and we started 2 days later on the 2nd, okay? And then look what happens. Now it went from 2 days as a start variance, being behind 2 days, to 1 day when this task was completed. How did that happen? Well, you got to know your project. As you recall in the previous training video, when we entered in the actuals, it was actually 5 days duration, and we said no, just be 4 days. So that accounts for 1 day. So the finish date, instead of still being 2 days as the start date, it says, well, you finished a day early, so now you're just 1 day behind, okay? So we're going in 1 day behind into the next task, and so when we look at this for the start date on the 6th, the baseline start was the 7th. So we're starting a day ahead. So because we're going into this task a day behind, and we started a day ahead, now that should be zeroed out, okay, for the start. Now what about the finish? So we finished on the 10th. What's the actual baseline finish? Well, it's the following Monday, so we finished a day earlier because we finished on a Friday instead of the following Monday, so that puts us at a -1. So now we're ahead of schedule because of this task finishing 1 day ahead. And because it finishes 1 day ahead, well, you can look at the next task, and we haven't said that that was completed, so it just naturally gets bumped up a day early to start on this one. So when this one gets finished because of the finish to start relationship on the Friday, then the following Monday, the next task is going to start on the 13th, okay? And you can see it goes on until it comes down here, and then what happens here? So when it finishes on the 14th, and you come down here to create outline, shouldn't that be starting on the 15th? Again, you got to know your project, because if you go back to the Gantt chart and you look at the create outline, well, come with me, boys and girls. Let's go over here and right click on the view bar and go back to the Gantt chart, and there's create outline, right? Now look at create outline. It's got two predecessors that it's linked to, relationships. It's got the milestone, and it's also got this one right here, the examine software. Now, if you have a task that has two predecessors that it's linked to in a relationship, it's going by the one that's going to be starting the latest here, so it's pushing it out. This one's starting earlier, but since it's linked to one that's going to be starting later, then it's going to go off of this one, so it pushes this one out, okay? In fact, you can double click if you want to see it another way. Go to predecessors. It's the predecessor start manual and examine software, okay? So examine software is finishing on what date? It's through the 7th. So this one can start on the 8th, right? Well, let's just go back to the task sheet. It's easier for me to look at the numbers here than to look at those bars and try to figure it out and hover over them. So completes on the 7th, which is up here, examine software, so this one can start on the 8th. So we're looking over here and we're saying, okay, what was the baseline, the original plan for this task? Well, it was supposed to start on the 7th. Oops, now it's starting on the 8th. So we're at a day behind as these tasks start rolling forward, and then what happens down here? How come we go from a day behind to no days behind? Well, again, know your project. The modify outline, let's take a look at that task, double click on it, go to the advanced tab. It's got a constraint date. It cannot start any earlier than the 22nd, so if you're looking at the 22nd and these finish on the 10th, then obviously this one's going to be okay. So this can actually finish on the 11th, 12th, as long as these tasks don't finish so late that it bumps out the modify outline, this task from the start no earlier than the 22nd to the 23rd, 24th, and it's not going to bump out the start variance to 1, 2, 3 or more days. As you recall in an earlier training video where we go to enter in our actuals, it's basically going to be the tracking table. But you can be in any view and pull up the tracking table. Like for example, when you come over here and right click on the view bar and go to the Gantt chart and say, okay, I want to go ahead and change the table here to the tracking. Come up here and right click on the table header cell, which is the blank cell there. You can go to tracking. Then I'm going to come over here and click and drag the split bar so I can see less of the chart, more of the table. In fact, while we're here, let's go ahead and update the 5th task. Interview subject matter expert, mark it complete. You can do it many ways. You can go ahead and enter in the actual start and finish dates, which the actual start, if it's the planned date, will be the following, well, after this task has been completed on Friday the 10th. So this one should start on Monday the 13th. So you can enter that in or type in 100% here, or come up here on the task tab to the schedule group and click on 100%. You can see it does the calculation, fills in 100%. The plan was the 13th and to end on the 14th, 2 days, says 2 days. And then the calculation, the cost, and the actual work, I can go ahead and undo that and say, okay, when I undo that, it actually takes the text within the cell here and wraps it around so you can see it within the cell, which stretches the entire row. Well, that's okay. Let's come over here, and if I type in 16 hours, well, 8 hours a day, so 8 times 2 is 16. So when I type in 16, it marks it complete. Finishes on the 14th, Monday's the first day and Tuesday's the second day. Again, project will automatically calculate the actual and remaining work and cost for resources assigned to the task. If you want to do this manually and you don't want it to automatically calculate for you, then you want to come up here and click on the File tab, go down to Options, come up here and select the Schedule category, and then let's go ahead and scroll down here. And then the calculation options for this project section, you want to uncheck Updating Task Status Updates Resource Status, and well, you can read more about that, but I like Project to go ahead and automatically do the calculations for me. I mean, I don't want to go through that. Otherwise, I have to pull out a calculator, and for me, Project is great at being the calculator that it is, but in any case, it's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel. I'm in the Gantt chart view here, but I've changed the table from the entry table to the tracking table. Now, in the tracking table, I can go ahead and mark my tasks complete, as they're completed, of course, 100%. Now, the progress bars, which is what this video is about, the definition of a progress bar is a black bar in the middle of taskbar in the Gantt chart indicating the completed part of the task. And you can see that over here in the Gantt chart. You've got a black bar here through the middle of the taskbar, black bar there. Let's go ahead and do another one. Let's complete this one. In fact, instead of having it at 100%, if I come in here and type in 50 and hit enter, I don't know if you can see that, but the black bar goes halfway, indicating that we're halfway through the task. You can't really see it, even if we did 25%. Let's do 25. I mean, gosh, is that like 22%? Is that 18%? I mean, without looking in the table, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but you can come over here and either eyeball it or, well, if you can hover over that black bar, there you go. At the bottom of the pop-up, you can see percent complete 25%. In any case, let me go ahead and go back to 50%. As I mentioned in an earlier training video, you can use the variance table to compare against your actual start and finish dates versus your baseline start and finish dates. And as a quick review, you can change your table here to go to the variance table to do the comparison by coming up here and right-clicking on the table header and going down to variance, and there you go. So for task 3, examine software, let's see, the baseline start was supposed to be August the 31st, but it didn't start until the next month, a couple days later, September the 2nd. So oopsie doodle. In any case, not only can you view this in the table format, but if you're more of a graphic person and you want to see this in a chart, you can go to the tracking Gantt by coming over here and right-clicking on the view bar, and, well, it's right there. I mean, this jump list or the shortcut list will remember other views that I've been to, and can't see it here. Ha ha ha. Then come over here and select more views and scroll down because it's sorted alphabetically. Tracking, there we go in the T's. Tracking Gantt, double click. And if you don't see the chart over here, again, come up here, right click on the time scale, go down to zoom, select entire project, click OK, and there we go. Okay, as you recall in earlier training videos, anytime you see blue bars and red bars in a chart, you got the good guys versus the bad guys. Well, the blue bars represent that the task can slip or be delayed before it affects the project's end date or pushes it out. How much? Well, a couple of days, but if it goes out too far, eventually it's going to become critical, which is those task bars in red. And once it becomes critical, you got a critical path here that if this one becomes delayed, it pushes out the next task, and then that pushes out the next one like a domino effect, and eventually pushes out the project's end date, and we got to finish on time. So, in any case, below the task bars, you have these gray bars. Those are the baselines, so you can quickly, over in the chart, view whether you're ahead of schedule or behind. And for this task, you can see that the baseline started over here, that gray bar, and you can see we slipped a couple of days. I mean, if I didn't know my project here and the task that we just covered, it was 2 days, then I could go ahead and hover over the bars and go, okay, it was supposed to start the baseline August 31st, and let me come up here and hover over what actually happened. It started Thursday. You can see in the pop-up September the 2nd. You know, if you get tired of hovering to bring up the pop-ups, you can go ahead and change the table here. As we just learned, right-click on the table header from entry, and you can go to variance. So you can quickly look over here and go, let's see, is anything off? So if the taskbar in blue or red is to the right, that means it's behind. If it's to the left, that means, well, it started earlier, okay? So that's good to see. And then you can get more nitty-gritty and going, ooh, I wonder this task right here, how early did it start? Well, what was the baseline start? Well, it was supposed to start on September the 7th, but search internal documentation started on the 6th. You can see it right there. Cool. A progress line is a line drawn on the chart based upon either the status or the current date. Now, we already covered the status date in the status date training video, so we'll continue here, creating a progress line on the chart based upon the current date. Now, before I can add the progress line, I need to change my current date. And I can do that by coming up here, clicking on the Project tab, going to the Properties group and clicking on Project Information. Because as you recall, my project starts and completes back in 2010, and the current date, well, that's today's date. I know, I'm a little bit behind, but don't worry. Let's go ahead and come over here, and I will copy this date here and come over here and paste it, so that way you don't have to scroll back or type it in. Then once I get to that date, let's go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow, so I'm back in 2010. Let's go ahead and go out just almost a couple of weeks there, like let's say the 13th. That's going to be our current date, and then go ahead and click Okie dokie. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but it has that dotted line right there for the current date, and you can see that it's got lines here, but there's an extra line here on that weekend, or close to the weekend, that you don't see on any other weekends. So it actually kind of draws it in the current date, so you can kind of see it in the background. But if you really want to see it and have it act as a progress line, then go ahead and right-click in the blank area of the Gantt chart here. go down to Progress Lines, then come up here on the Date and Intervals tab where it says Current Progress Line, the section. We want to display it, not at the project status date, but at the current date, and click OK. Now you can see that there's the red line for the current date, and if it peaks to the left, that means that we're behind schedule. If it stays on it, like you can see right here, that one's on schedule. This task right here, Interview Subject Matter Experts, and anything that peaks to the right will be ahead of schedule. And then like I mentioned in that earlier training video, if you want to based upon the status date and not the current date, then just come back up here, click on Project Information, and you can see status date. Even if we set it to status date, because it's NA, it'll default to the current date. So we need to go ahead and change this. Let me click and drag to select that date, to copy it down here, and then to click on the drop down arrow. And let's go to just almost a week out here, not quite. And then go ahead and click OK. And then right click in a blank area in the Gantt chart, go to the progress line, and say that we want to display it at the project status date. Click OK, and oh, there you go. Looks like it peaks a little to the left here, not a big peak. So as far as the status goes at that point in time, we're just a little bit ahead of schedule right there. Just a teaky bit. Don't squint. You may hurt your eyes, but it's just a little bit. As you recall in an earlier training video, we talked about the column here in the Gantt chart. It's the indicators column. You can hover over the column header, and it says in the pop-up, it'll display indicators that give different types of information about a task or resource. And when you hover over one of these little icons, it pops up and it says, okay, this is a check to say that the task has been completed, then the date, and then this is a message. You can read the message, and then you've got indicators for constraints, also for those resources assigned to a task that are over allocated. I mean, when you overwork somebody, they get angry, so they turn red, so you get a red dude here. In any case, in this training video, you can also pull in what's called a status indicator, well, as a column here. And what a status indicator column is that it'll show status of a task as either completed, on schedule, late, or in the future. To bring it up, as you recall in earlier training videos, you can just go ahead and right-click on any column header and go down to Insert Column, and then type in the first couple letters of that column's name. There you go, Status Indicator. Go ahead and select it. There we go. If it's too big, go ahead and click and drag the split bar over, and hover over to the right-hand side in between the two column headers until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then click and drag that in, and that's a bit better. Okay, you can see when you hover over the indicator, it says, hey, this project summary task is behind schedule. Well, it's a summary task, so if any of the tasks below are behind schedule, then the project summary task will be behind schedule. And these others, they're completed, so they're okay. But as you recall, my project was set back in 2010. So if we come up here, click on the Project tab, go to the Properties group, click on Project Information, it starts and finishes in 2010, and the current date is today's date. And so if I go ahead and I set the current date to, well, let me come over here and copy that and paste it over here. So when I click on the drop-down arrow, it takes me back to 2010. So if I say the current date is to maybe the 9th, well, then you can see here that the tasks that were behind schedule according to the current date are not behind, because the current date, you can see that line right there, is the current date drawn. Looks like these other lines here that separate the weekends here. And so you can hover over these and say, oh, this task is on schedule. Hey, fabulous. And these ones, of course, are completed. And because those tasks are on schedule, then the project summary task is on schedule as well. Okay. If you ever experience delays or interruptions with one of your tasks where it has to be stopped for a time, you can do what's called a task split. And I'm looking at Task 7, Create Outline. That's got a duration of 2 days. And you can see over here in the Gantt chart, the resource Writer 1 has been assigned to it, and part of it's been completed. How do you know? Well, you can see the black progress bar over the task bar, and to know exactly how much, if it's 41% or 52%, just hover over it. Click off, hover over it again. And if you're just tired of hovering, waiting for that pop-up, and you can see in the pop-up down at the bottom, 50% of it's been completed, then the other option is you can come up here and change the table from the entry table, give it a right-click on the table header cell, that blank cell, and go down to Tracking, and then click and drag the split bar over, and you can see that the actual start date for this task was September the 8th. 50% of it was completed, so of 2 days, half of that is 1 day for the actual duration of completion, and then 1 day left to complete the remaining duration. So let me come up here and hit undo so I can go back quickly to where we were. And then to go ahead and split the remaining part of the task that hasn't been completed and push it out to a later date, 1, 2 days, 3 days, or however many, until Writer 1's available again. You can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either come up here on the Task tab and go to the Schedule group, and there it is, Split Task, pop up. And when you do it this way, you don't have to have the task selected. You can have, in fact, any task selected and come up here, because when you click on it, and I move it down here, you can see that it's got that pop-up Split Task. It just says, okay, go ahead and click on the taskbar over here in the Gantt chart that you want to split. And it's going to be this one right here. And when I hover over it, if it's on the black progress line, you don't get a date in that pop-up. But when I go to a time that it hasn't been completed, which is the second day, September the 9th, you can see that date right there. That means I can go ahead and click and it will split it out. Now when I click on it, the default split is 1 day. So you've got 1 day that was completed, a day of delay, and then the next day, which would be when I hover over it, Friday is when it should finish, or when Writer 1's available. But if he calls up and says, no, I'm not available on Friday, actually this is really bad and I need to come back in a couple of days later, so you can hover over that part of the split task that's been pushed out. You can see the first task, ... and the second, until you get a 4-way arrow. Then you can click and drag that out, and you can see when I start dragging that you get in that pop-up those dates that says, okay, if I move it right here, it's going to be bumped out to Monday the 13th. If I move it back, there's the 9th, and there's a weekend. Of course, we don't finish on weekends, so we'll bump it out to the 13th, let go, and there you go. So we now have a delay of 2 days, and as far as the project end date goes, it's not pushing that out because we've got this task constraint on Modify Outline when you hover over it to start no earlier than September the 22nd. So we can keep pushing this out until it affects this and it gets past the 22nd, goes to the 23rd, in which case this is going to become critical and push out the project end date. So we're still good if he wants to delay that. Well, I like my task to be completed a lot earlier because, hey, we get bonuses when we complete our project early. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag this back. You split it and you don't want to split it and you don't have the undo button, you can click and drag it and kiss it, the first part of the tag, just slam it right back into it and let go, and hey, it's whole again. You can do it that way, or you can, to split it, right click on the tasks bar and you get that little pop-up bar there, the least of which is split task, and then of course go ahead and hover and click and boom. I hovered over the 9th, so it splits out. So the 8th was completed, the 9th, September the 9th is a day of delay. And then September, when I hover over this one, the 10th is when it gets completed. The duration you can see in the pop-up is still 2 days, even though it's delayed a day, and you can say, well, it's 3 days. Well, not actually to complete the task. To complete the task, it's 2, but taking into consideration that extra day of delay, you could say, well, it's a 3-day task. But not how project's going to calculate this. It's going to look at how long it actually takes to complete the task, not the delays. If you get a task split, it might be a wise thing to come over here for that task and double click on it and go to the Notes tab and type in a note saying something like, work interrupted on September the 9th due to a family emergency for Writer 1. Click OK. So that way when you look over here somebody else and goes, hey, what's with the delay? You can hover over the little task note and go, okay, good on you, Gov. You got an explanation of why it's been delayed. As you recall in the previous training video, we learned what a split task is. It's basically taking a task that you're going to have an interruption or a delay in and splitting it and moving that part of the task that has not been completed yet to a later date. Actually, you can split any task. It doesn't have to be completed. Even split those that haven't even started yet. As you can see, these tasks over in my Gantt chart haven't started. And the difference between splitting a task and what we're about to do here, which is called rescheduling a task, is rescheduling a task is taking a task that has already started, even if it's only 1% complete, and rescheduling that part that hasn't been completed yet to a specified later date. So splitting a task, you can split anything, but rescheduling a task using that feature, it only works on those tasks that have already started, but haven't been completed yet, okay? I mean, you can choose which one you want to use, but let me go ahead and show you this one. So in this example, we're going to be using the Create Outline task, and as you recall in the previous training video, we split this one. Well, I put it back together so we can go ahead and use the Reschedule Task feature and reschedule that part that hasn't been completed that Writer 1 says he can't make it in on that day, so he has to come in at a later time. And when you hover over the black progress bar, it's 50% complete, so of the 2-day duration, He's got 1 day left to work, and if you hover over the blue taskbar, you can see it's September the 8th and September the 9th. He cannot come in on the 9th, but he can come in on the 10th. So to go ahead and reschedule that part that hasn't been completed by using this feature, Reschedule Task, come up here, click on the Project tab. Oh, and be sure that you have that task that you want to reschedule selected. And then from the Project tab to the status group, click on Update Project. You got two options: update work as complete through whatever date, and so you can say, okay, everything through this date is going to be 100% complete, or you can set the percentage. In any case, that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to be rescheduling uncompleted work, which is only this task right here, to start after, let me type in the date, 9/9/10, and click on the drop down arrow. Now keep in mind it says after. So if I want him to start after the 9th, that he's going to come in on the 10th because he cannot come in on the 9th, then select the 9th so he can come in after the 9th, okay? You can do it for the entire project, but what's the point? Because we only have one task that has a % of it completed, and it only affects, again, those tasks that are uncompleted but have already started. In other words, even if it's % complete, okay? And then go ahead and you can click OK, or if you just want to focus on this task because maybe you have others that have started but haven't completed and you just want to do this one, then click OK. And there you go, it splits it out. We've got a 1 day of delay here. So when you hover over that part of the task that's been split, you can see that in the pop-up, Friday, September the 10th is when he's coming in to go ahead and complete it. It still has a duration of 2 days because that's how long it's going to take in man hours, 16 hours to complete the task. It doesn't take into effect the delay here. And then if I want to go ahead and bring it back together because I made a mistake, and if the undo button isn't available, as you recall in the previous training video, for a split task, just hover over the end part of that task that's been split until you can see a 4-way arrow, then click and drag and slam it back so it touches and it sticks together. Now it's just one task here that hasn't been split. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.